I stood in the doorway of the house I'd just bought, holding the keys so tight my knuckles turned white, and watched my husband's face go completely blank. For a moment, maybe 3 seconds, he didn't say anything. He just stared at me like I'd told him I was moving to Mars. "You did what?" His voice came out quiet, which was somehow worse than if he'd yelled. I'd been so proud, so certain he'd be thrilled. 24 years of marriage, and I thought I finally knew how to make him happy. I thought I'd done something extraordinary. I was wrong about everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to where this story actually starts, back to when I still believed in the version of our life that we'd built together. My name is Rachel. I'm 41 years old, and I work as a warehouse supervisor at Coastal Freight in Monterey, California. I've had the same job for 13 years. Not glamorous, not exciting, but steady. I know every shelf in that warehouse like I know the lines on my own face. I make decent money. Not rich, but enough. Enough to put away something every month. Enough to feel like I was building towards something. The thing about Monterey in December is that it's beautiful in a way that makes your chest ache. The ocean sits right there, gray and cold and endless. And even though I grew up 3 hours inland, something about this town got under my skin. Maybe it was the way the fog rolled in at 5 o'clock and made everything feel like a secret. Maybe it was just that I'd convinced myself that living here meant we were people who had made it. My husband is named David Mitchell. He's 43, works in sales for a medical device company, and he's the kind of man who looks better in a suit than most people look in anything. We met in college, UC Santa Cruz, 1999. I was studying business administration. He was studying me from across the coffee shop for 3 weeks before he finally worked up the nerve to say hello. I remember thinking he was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And I was right. He still is. That's part of what makes this so hard to talk about. We'd been married since 2000, 24 years. That's a lifetime, basically. We'd moved around, San Francisco for a while, then Sacramento, then down to Monterey 5 years ago when David got promoted. We'd never had kids. It wasn't a choice we made together, exactly. It was more like a thing that didn't happen, and then we got older, and then it became clear it wasn't going to happen, and we just accepted it. Sometimes I wondered if David minded more than he said, but mostly we were fine. We were more than fine. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in a decent complex off Del Monte Avenue. Nothing special, but it had a small courtyard with a fountain, and our place got morning light. David spent a lot of time at work. A lot of time. His company had him traveling to San Francisco every couple of weeks, sometimes staying overnight. I didn't mind. I had my job. I had my routine. I had Maverick. Maverick is a pit bull mix I adopted from the Monterey Peninsula Animal Shelter 3 years ago. He's not a pure breed. They think he might be part boxer, maybe some American Staffordshire. And he's not young. The shelter said he was about 8 when I got him. That made him 11 now, graying around the muzzle, his movements a little stiffer in the mornings. But he was sweet, gentle with me in a way that made me feel less alone on the nights when David was gone. Here's something I should tell you about that apartment. The upstairs neighbor was a man named Gregory Hoffman. Gregory was about 50, thin in a way that suggested he'd been sick at some point, with precise gray hair and the kind of smile that never quite reached his eyes. He moved in about 2 years ago. For the first 6 months, he was quiet, polite. He'd nod when he saw me, ask how my day was going. David had never met him. David was always on the road, or in the garage working on his car, or in his study handling work emails that came in at odd hours. But Gregory and I saw each other a lot. You can't live in an apartment complex without seeing your upstairs neighbor. You hear them, their footsteps, their television, sometimes their arguments on the phone. Gregory seemed to have a lot of phone arguments. But he was always nice to me. Always. In September of that year, September of 2024, I'd been thinking about houses. Not seriously, just thinking. I'd run the numbers 1,000 times in my head. my salary, David's salary, our savings. We had about $140,000 saved. Not enough for a down payment on anything in Monterey, where a small house started around $1.2 million. But I kept thinking about it anyway. I'd scroll through Zillow on my lunch break. I'd drive through neighborhoods after work. I'd imagine what it would feel like to own something, to have something that was actually ours. In October, my mother called. This was unusual. My mother and I have never been close. She's lived in Portland for 20 years with her second husband, and we talk maybe 4 times a year. But she called on the Tuesday morning, and her voice sounded different, smaller. "Rachel, honey, I need to tell you something," she said. I didn't want to, but my lawyer said I had to. My mother had died 2 weeks earlier. A stroke, very sudden. She was only 68. I hadn't known she was sick. I hadn't known much about her life at all, really. But apparently, she'd left me something. An inheritance. A house. Well, a house that was paid off, which meant she'd left me the equity in it. Her lawyer had it valued at $385,000. I remember standing in the break room at work, holding my phone, staring at a wall calendar from 2023 that nobody had bothered to take down. "Rachel, are you there?" That was my mother's husband, Richard. He'd gotten on the phone. "She wanted you to have it. She said she was sorry she hadn't been a better mother. That's what she said." I had never seen my mother's house. I had maybe 3 memories of her in my adult life. But she'd left me $385,000. I didn't tell David right away. I know that sounds strange, but I wanted to think about it first. I needed to understand what it meant. I called the lawyer, asked 1,000 questions. The house was in Portland. I could sell it, I could rent it out, I could do whatever I wanted with it. It would take about 2 months to finalize everything, but the money would be mine. That's when I started looking at houses in Monterey, seriously. The thing is, I never once thought about asking David what he wanted. I know how that sounds, I know. But in a marriage that long, you develop patterns. David made the big decisions about his career. I made the decisions about the house. That's just how we'd always been. He'd lived with me choosing apartments, choosing furniture, choosing where we'd spend holidays. He'd never complained. He'd never said, "Hey Rachel, maybe I should have a say in where we live." So I looked at houses. For 6 weeks, I looked at houses. There was one I kept coming back to. A small craftsman-style house built in 1987 on a quiet street about 4 blocks from the beach. It needed work. The kitchen was original to 1987. The bathroom was a disaster. The roof needed replacing in about 3 years. The listing price was $425,000. With my inheritance, I could put down $385,000 and finance the rest. My monthly payment would be about $1,200, which was almost exactly what we were paying in rent, except this time the money would be building equity. This time, it would be ours. I talked to a mortgage broker. I got pre-approved. I put in an offer. The offer was accepted in November. The whole time, I kept meaning to tell David. I'd rehearse it in my head. "Hey, remember how I got that inheritance? Well, I found us a house." But there was never a good moment. He was stressed about work. We were navigating the holidays. His mother was planning to visit for Thanksgiving. And part of me, and I see this now looking back, part of me wanted to present it to him as a done deal, a gift, something I'd accomplished, something that would make him proud of me. The closing happened on December 10th, a Tuesday. I arranged to leave work early. I went to the title company in downtown Monterey with a notary public and a woman named Patricia, who was the escrow officer, and I signed my name 47 times. I remember counting. 47 times my signature went on documents that said the house was mine. When I walked out of that building, I was a homeowner. I drove straight to the house. It's on Cypress Avenue, a tree-lined street where neighbors wave at each other, and there's a little park 2 blocks away. The house is pale yellow, with white trim and dark green shutters. The front porch has columns, and there's a small garden box where someone has planted winter pansies. I sat in the driveway for 20 minutes, just looking at it, just letting it sink in. Then I drove home to tell David. He was already there, which was unusual. It was only 5:30 p.m. Usually, he didn't get back until after 7. He was in the garage, working on his car, a 1967 Mustang he'd been restoring for 8 years. He had the hood up, and he was bent over the engine, and when I came in, he straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag. "Hey," he said, "you're home early." That's when I should have known something was wrong. Because the tone of his voice was off. It was too careful, too aware. But I didn't notice it. I was too full of my own news. "David, I have something to tell you," I said. "Something amazing." He set the rag down slowly. He looked at me, and there was something in his expression that I couldn't quite read. "I bought a house," I said. "I closed on it today. It's perfect. It's small, but it has so much character, and it's close to the beach, and—" "You what?" His voice was very quiet. "I bought a house. Didn't I tell you about the inheritance? My mother left me." "Rachel, you bought a house without talking to me?" "Well, yes, but I was going to tell you. I'm telling you now. I wanted to surprise you. I thought you'd be—" "Surprised." He said the word like it was an insult, like it was the worst thing I could have done. He turned back to his car. He picked up the rag and went back to working on the engine, not looking at me, his movements sharp and angry. I stood there, waiting for something, waiting for him to turn around, waiting for him to say something else. But he didn't. He just kept working, and the silence stretched out between us like a living thing, and I realized that I had made a terrible mistake. "David, talk to me," I said. "There's nothing to talk about," he said, still not looking at me. "You've already made your decision. You've already bought the house. But it's for us. It's for both of us." He finally looked at me then, and his face was completely shuttered, completely closed off in a way I'd never seen before. "Is it?" he said. "Is it really?" And that's when everything started to unravel. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed next to David while he pretended to sleep, both of us rigid, not touching, listening to the sound of the ocean that was supposed to be romantic, but now felt like a countdown to something terrible. The next morning, he left for work without eating breakfast. He didn't kiss me goodbye. He didn't even look at me. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee getting cold, and I realized that I had no idea how to fix this. I had no framework for it. In 24 years of marriage, we'd never had a fight like this. We'd had disagreements, sure. Small arguments about money or his mother or whose turn it was to handle something. But nothing that had ever made him look at me like I was a stranger. I called my boss and told her I was sick. Then I drove to the house on Cypress Avenue and sat on the front porch, trying to figure out what the hell I'd done wrong. The house was beautiful. Even in the gray December light, it was beautiful. The pansies in the garden box were still perfect. The white columns looked solid and real. This was supposed to be ours. This was supposed to be the thing that made everything better, that proved I was capable of something, that showed David I could take care of us, that I had a plan and the means to execute it. Instead, I'd apparently committed some kind of unforgivable sin. Around noon, I drove back to the apartment. Gregory Hoffman was in the courtyard, checking his mailbox. He looked up when he saw me, and his face did something strange, like he was trying to arrange it into an expression of surprise, but the surprise was already there underneath. "Rachel," he said, "you're home early." "Just needed a personal day," I said. I wasn't going to discuss my marriage with my upstairs neighbor. "Everything okay?" His voice had that particular quality that made me want to leave the conversation immediately. Too interested, too invested. "Fine," I said, "just fine." "David must be happy about the house," Gregory said. I stopped. I literally stopped walking and turned to look at him. "How do you know about the house?" I asked. He smiled, that smile that never reached his eyes. "David and I had coffee last week. He mentioned something about you looking at properties. He seemed concerned, if I'm being honest." My stomach did something unpleasant. "He was concerned?" I said. "That I was looking at houses? As in, our houses?" "He said he wasn't sure if it was a good idea," Gregory said. "He said he was worried about the financial implications. He said you hadn't discussed it with him." I couldn't breathe properly. David had talked to Gregory Hoffman about our finances? David, who never mentioned our personal life to anyone, who kept everything close to his chest, who had shared our private business with this man who lived above us? "That's very personal information to share with a neighbor," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Well, we've become friends," Gregory said. "He comes up to my place sometimes. We have a few drinks, talk about life. He seems lonely sometimes, Rachel, like maybe he's not getting what he needs at home." The words hung there, suspended in the courtyard between us, and I felt something shift in my understanding of the situation. Something fundamental. "I should go," I said. "Of course," Gregory said. "But, Rachel, if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm right upstairs. David might not understand what you're going through, but I think I might." I got inside the apartment and locked the door. I was shaking. Not angry shaking, confused shaking. My husband was having coffee with the man who lived above us. My husband was talking to him about our finances, about me not discussing things with him. My husband was telling him that he was lonely. I needed to understand what was happening. I pulled out my laptop and I did something I'd never done before. I looked at the credit card statements. All of them. Going back 6 months. There were charges I didn't recognize. Restaurant charges mostly. Michelin-starred places in San Francisco. Hotel charges. Not hotels we'd stayed in together. Hotels in San Francisco in the Marina District charged to dates when David had said he was at work conferences. Boutique hotels with names like the Fairmont and the St. Regis. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the mouse. I checked his phone bill. Numbers I didn't recognize, called repeatedly at odd hours. I Googled one of them. It was a woman's name. Her Instagram came up immediately. Her name was Victoria Chen. She was 32 years old. She worked in venture capital. She had perfect dark hair and the kind of cheekbones that made me look at my own reflection in the black mirror of the laptop screen and wonder how I'd ever thought David could be satisfied with me. There were photos of her in San Francisco, at restaurants, at hotels. In one photo, she was wearing a dress that I recognized, a dress David had bought me for my birthday 2 years ago. Except she was wearing a very similar one in navy blue instead of black. I sat there, staring at the screen, and I felt the entire world reorganize itself around a single, terrible fact. David was having an affair. I didn't confront him that night. I didn't confront him for 3 days. I just gathered information. I looked at every credit card statement, every phone bill, every email I could find. I created a timeline. The affair had been going on for 18 months. 18 months. Since April of 2023. That was before we'd even moved to Monterey. That was when we were living in Sacramento, when I thought everything was fine, when I was just living my quiet life and going to work and coming home to a husband who was apparently spending his time in San Francisco hotels with a woman half his age. The thing that broke me wasn't the affair itself. It was the deliberateness of it. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was 18 months of planning, of lying, of telling me he was at work conferences when he was in a hotel room with someone else. 18 months of coming home and kissing me and sleeping in my bed like nothing was wrong. And then I understood why he was so angry about the house. The house represented a future where we stayed together, where we built something new, where he had to keep lying. The house was a commitment I was making, without knowing that the person I was committed to had already committed himself elsewhere. On December 13th, I waited until he came home. He got back around 6:30 p.m. He smelled like cologne and someone else's perfume. I could smell it on his neck, faint and floral. Chanel, maybe. Something expensive. "We need to talk," I said. He set his briefcase down very carefully. "Okay," he said. "Talk." "Who is Victoria Chen?" I watched his face. I watched it go through several emotions in rapid succession: surprise, fear, calculation, and finally, something like resignation. "How did you," he started. "Your credit card statements, your phone bill. 18 months, David? 18 months?" He walked past me into the living room. He sat down on the couch. He didn't try to deny it. He didn't make excuses. He just sat there, and after a moment, he said, "I was going to end it." "When?" I asked. "When were you going to end it? After you moved into the house with me? After you got more comfortable with her?" "That's not fair," he said. "Not fair?" I could hear my voice getting higher, sharper. "You want to talk about fair? You want to talk about fair, David? I just bought us a house. I made this huge commitment. I thought we were building a future together, and you've been lying to me for a year and a half." "I know," he said. "I know." "Do you love her?" The question came out before I could stop it. He didn't answer right away, and in that silence, I got my answer. "We need to talk about this rationally," he said finally. "We need to figure out what we're going to do." "What we're going to do?" I said. "I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to get a divorce. That's what we're going to do." He looked at me then, and his face was sad in a way that made me want to hurt him. "I didn't want it to be like this," he said. "Well, that's what you get," I said. "That's what you get for lying. That's what you get for making me feel crazy while you were off playing house with someone else." I left the apartment. I got in my car, and I drove to the house on Cypress Avenue. I sat on the front porch in the dark, and I called a lawyer. Her name was Patricia Morales, and I found her through an online search for family law attorneys in Monterey. I called her at 9 p.m. on a Thursday night, and she actually answered. "I think my husband is having an affair," I said, "and I just bought a house without his knowledge, and I think I'm about to get divorced." "Okay," she said, with the calm of someone who'd heard this 1,000 times before. "Let's start at the beginning." I spent the next hour on the phone with Patricia, laying out the entire situation. The inheritance, the house purchase, the affair, the credit card statements. She listened without interrupting, and when I was done, she said, "Here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to document everything. Every credit card statement, every phone bill, every piece of evidence that shows financial infidelity. Second, we're going to look at the house situation. Since you purchased it with your inheritance before he knew about it, it's likely to be considered separate property. But we need to be careful. Third, we're going to file for divorce, and we're going to make sure you're protected." "He said he was going to end it," I told her. "With the other woman. He said he was going to end it." "People say a lot of things," Patricia said. "What matters is what they do." I hung up with her and sat in the dark on the porch of my house, because it was my house, I reminded myself. It was mine. And I tried to figure out what came next. The next morning, I went to work. I didn't tell David I'd called a lawyer. I didn't tell him I was planning to leave. I just went about my day like everything was normal, and I documented everything. I made copies of all the credit card statements. I printed out the phone bills. I took screenshots of Victoria Chen's Instagram. I created a file on my phone with dates and times and locations of every charge I could find that corresponded to the affair. And then, on December 20th, I came home to find David packing a suitcase. "I'm going to stay at a hotel for a while," he said. "I think we both need some space." "Fine," I said. "Stay wherever you want." "Rachel, I know you're angry." "Angry?" I laughed, and it sounded like a sound a broken person would make. "I'm past angry. I'm just done." He left. He packed a suitcase, and he left. And I sat on the couch with Maverick, who laid his head on my lap like he understood, and I cried. But I also made calls. I called the title company and made sure the house was in my name alone. I called Patricia back and told her we were officially moving forward with the divorce. I called my bank and set up a separate account for my paycheck. I was going to protect myself. I was going to make sure that whatever happened next, I came out of it with something. On December 28th, I got a phone call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer it, but something made me pick up. "Rachel, hi, this is Victoria Chen." I couldn't speak. "I know this is weird," she said. "David gave me your number. I thought you should know something." "Know what?" I managed to say. "I'm pregnant," she said. "I'm 8 weeks pregnant. David doesn't know yet. I was going to tell him, but then I realized he was married, and I thought maybe you should know, before he decides what he wants to do." The world stopped. "He's been with me for 18 months, Victoria said, and I thought we were building something real. But now I understand that he's been lying to both of us, and I don't want to be alone in this. I thought you should know." "Thank you for telling me," I said, and I meant it. I meant it with every fiber of my being. I hung up and I called Patricia immediately. "This changes things," Patricia said. "This is huge. David is going to have child support obligations. His assets are going to be divided differently. This actually works very much in your favor." I thought about that. I thought about David having a child with Victoria Chen. I thought about how that meant he'd been planning a future with her while lying to me. I thought about how the house I'd bought, the house I'd thought was going to be our fresh start, was now going to be just mine. 2 days later, I got another call. This time, it was from Gregory Hoffman. "I need to talk to you about something," he said. "Can we meet?" We met in the courtyard of the apartment complex. Gregory was wearing a nice shirt, and his hair was perfectly styled. He looked nervous. "I've been thinking about our conversation," he said, "the one where I mentioned that David and I had been talking, and I realized, I think I might have given you the wrong impression." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean, I don't think David was actually interested in being friends with me," Gregory said. "I think I was interested in being friends with him, and maybe I said some things to you that I shouldn't have said, things that made it sound like David was unhappy. Because maybe I wanted him to be unhappy. Because I was interested in you, and I thought if you thought David was unhappy, then maybe—" He trailed off, but I understood. Gregory Hoffman had been trying to manipulate me. Gregory Hoffman had been trying to drive a wedge between me and David, not because he cared about David, but because he wanted me. "That's deeply disturbing," I said. "I know," Gregory said. "I know it is. I'm sorry. I just wanted you to know that I didn't mean to cause any harm. I was just lonely." "You need to stay away from me," I said, "and I'm going to ask my landlord to make sure you understand that." I called the landlord that day and told him what Gregory had said, what he'd done. The landlord took it seriously. 2 weeks later, I heard that Gregory had given notice and was moving out. By January 15th, David had filed his own divorce petition. His lawyer was arguing for an equitable distribution of assets, which meant he wanted a portion of the house. Patricia fought back hard. She argued that since I'd purchased the house with my inheritance before David even knew about it, it was separate property and not subject to division. She argued that his infidelity and the resulting child support obligations actually disqualified him from claiming any interest in the house. The judge agreed with her. On February 3, 2025, the divorce was finalized. David paid me $800 a month in spousal support for the next 5 years, and he was going to pay Victoria Chen $2,500 a month in child support once the baby was born. I got the apartment contents, I got my car, and I got the house on Cypress Avenue. I got full ownership, no liens, no claims from David. I also got something else. I got a video deposition from Victoria Chen, who had decided that she didn't want to be part of David's life anymore and who had filed a restraining order against him after he'd shown up at her apartment uninvited. She had told the court that David had been controlling and manipulative, that he'd promised her he would leave his wife and then wouldn't, that he'd made her feel like she was going crazy. Sound familiar? I moved into the house on Cypress Avenue on February 15th. Maverick came with me. We had a small place, just the two of us, and it was ours. The first thing I did was paint the kitchen. I chose a soft yellow, the color of morning light. I chose it because it made me happy, and because nobody else got to tell me what color I could paint my own kitchen anymore. The second thing I did was plant new flowers in the garden box. I planted daisies because they're simple and cheerful, and they don't require anyone else's permission to bloom. On the first night in the house, I sat on the front porch with Maverick, and I watched the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. I thought about David. I thought about how I'd spent 24 years building a life with someone who didn't actually want to be in that life. I thought about how I'd tried so hard to make him happy, to do things that would impress him, to build something together. But I also thought about how I'd survived it, how I'd found out the truth, and I'd taken action. How I'd protected myself and my assets. How I'd turned something that was supposed to destroy me into something that freed me. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Patricia. She wrote, "Just wanted to check in. How are you doing?" I texted back, "I'm home." And I was finally home. 6 months later, I met someone at work. His name was Marcus, and he was a driver for one of our freight clients. He had kind eyes and a laugh that made other people smile. He asked me out for coffee, and I said yes. We took things slowly. We talked for hours about nothing important. He came to my house and helped me paint the bathroom. He met Maverick, and Maverick liked him, which meant something. But I was careful. I was always careful now. I kept my finances separate. I told him everything about David, about what I'd learned about myself, about how I never wanted to be that person again. The person who was so focused on making someone else happy that she forgot to question whether that person actually deserved her. "I don't know if I'm ready for anything serious," I told him on our 4th date. "That's okay," Marcus said. "I can wait, as long as you want." And that was the difference. That was the whole difference, right there. Someone who was willing to wait for me, instead of someone who was willing to lie to me. On the 1-year anniversary of buying the house, I stood on the front porch and looked at the daisies, which had grown and multiplied and now covered the entire garden box. They were bright yellow and white, and they looked like little suns. I thought about the woman I was when I bought this house. She was proud, she was confident, she thought she knew her husband. She thought she was doing something generous and loving. She was wrong about almost everything, but she was also right about one thing. She was building towards something. She just didn't know that what she was building toward was a life where she got to be herself. A life where she got to paint her kitchen yellow. A life where she got to choose. I pulled out my phone and,